All right, everybody. This is Dennis Misigoy, the Libertarian candidate for U.S. Senate here in the state of Florida. Looks like we finally got this thing working again. I apologize for the delay. It's quite a few minutes past our time and having to open up on a different, not on the live event, but hey, here we are, just the same. So it is October 27th. We are already within a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks from Election Day. It is Thursday. Election Day is on a Tuesday, so over a week, under 2 weeks. Early voting has started already here in Florida, and obviously people who get mail-in ballots, you've already got them. So you guys know what to do. You guys know what the time is, and all we can try to do right now is to try and spread this message as much as we can and let people know. For those who haven't voted yet, everybody's waiting. Obviously, I hope you haven't already wasted your vote on one of those, establishment candidates. That's going to be my message. Don't waste your vote on Marco Rubio or Val Demings, because, there's only one, and this is a point I was making yesterday and trying to make in a few posts today. There is only one anti-war vote, only one anti-socialism vote, only one free markets vote, only one sound money vote, and that is voting Libertarian, especially here in the state of Florida for the U.S. Senate. There is no other option on the ballot that will offer you those things that's going to support those policies, top to bottom, the pro-liberty, pro-peace agenda, that the principles of individual liberty and peace, which is what we're here to represent. So, obviously, if you're tuning in, you've probably already been around and heard me talk about this a bit, but I can't ever say it enough. It's so important, and it's why I'm out here and why I'm trying to do this and reach voters every which way I can. So this is probably going to be this is going to be our second to last Thursday live stream before the election. We'll see what we're doing after that, but for right now, this is our focus. Letting people know and making that message clear. I've been real happy to see a lot of traffic, and as the ballots have gone out, and sample ballots and the mail-in ballots, and now with early voting, more and more traffic and people sending in questions and visiting the website, the traffic has really gone up. So it's encouraging, because I know, and not just from this sort of thing, but not just from my own examples and what I've seen, even just right now, but just in general, that there's a lot of apathy amongst the people who aren't, the diehard Republicans and the diehard Democrats. They're in the tank for their people, but there's a lot of voters in the state who are not happy with those choices, as they should not be, and they're looking for an alternative, and we're here to offer it, and not just offer an alternative, but a principled alternative, an alternative that represents a break from the system. And so the opportunity for Florida to lead the way, man, and demonstrate to the other states that we can do something different. We don't need to be boxed in. We don't need to accept it being this way. We can do better. We can do something different. And the only way we can do it, though, is by having the courage to take that action, man. Speaking of, we talked about this topic a lot, actually. I was on a live stream yesterday, a nice long interview with Keith Bissett at Rebel Civics at Unsafe Space. Go check those out. Go look up Unsafe Space. They got on YouTube. They got on Rumble. I'm not sure what other platforms they stream on, but great interview, really long. I think we were there for almost 2 hours. So it is good stuff and a lot of topics covered. And, so I really encourage everybody, if you haven't checked that out. I'm also going to have something coming up. Hasn't been posted yet, but did an interview earlier this week as well. Finally get an interview done in Spanish. So para la gente que si lo quieren compartir con alguien que no habla inglés tanto, that'll be an opportunity for us to share with folks who'd rather consume a little bit more of the media in Spanish. So because it's something we desperately need also. Something I need to do a better job of myself. I would have very much liked to have been able to produce a bit more content, but you guys know it's not easy. Trying to do this. We don't have the $10 million machine behind us, and I say 10, I mean tens of millions of dollars machine, because you're talking about what Val Demings and Marco Rubio have spent on this race. I think she's upwards of $50 million already, and Marco Rubio's probably not too far behind, maybe around $30-40 million that they've raised at least. I'm not quite sure how much he's spent. I know he has a little bit more on hand. She's spent more, even though she's raised quite a bit more, but but that's what we're up against. That's the behemoth, the Goliath that we're up against. But I keep telling people, it doesn't matter. it does matter a little bit because it's hard to reach people. But what I want people to understand is if you hear the message and you know it and you get it and you feel, and you realize and you understand the principles and your eyes are open to this, man, let me tell you, it doesn't matter how much money they spend. They flood you with ads every single time you open up a new YouTube video and you see the ad pop up, or you're watching TV or whatever, and you keep seeing the ads pop up and they just keep trying to drown you in it. It doesn't matter because you know better. And that's our job. That's my job especially. And hopefully if you see it and you understand it, then you feel not an obligation, but a desire, and I guess being a little compelled to share it with others, because, we're never going to get out of this if we just coast along, if we just go with the flow and allow these guys, because they're not going with the flow. They are doing everything they can to get the power. So we got to step up and we got to say no, because what we're up against, is a disaster. 31 trillion in debt, over 9% inflation, and again, we are just pouring fuel on the fire in these conflicts overseas, looking for trouble, man. There was the reports that came out. It was behind closed doors, but you got President Biden out there acknowledging, hey, we're closer to nuclear Armageddon than at any time since like the Cuban Missile Crisis. Given that the Cold War ended 30 years ago, it doesn't make any sense, but it's because our policymakers are, just the worst. I mean, I don't know another way to describe it, another way to explain it, but these guys, when you look at the history of American foreign policy over the last couple decades especially, we have intervened in so many countries, and every single time the reasons given to the American people for it each time are lies, and every single time they intervene, they are wrong about the consequences every single time. And sometimes that you can get away with that because what is Bashar al-Assad going to do? What are the Taliban going to do? What is Saddam Hussein going to do? Or any of these people that we've picked fights with in the past? What they're going to do is one thing, but they don't have the capacity to do the damage to us the way Russia, with the next or maybe the largest nuclear arsenal in the world, what they can do if we escalate that conflict, get ourselves involved further, more clearly, and allow this to get even further out of control. The potential for harm for the American people is, like I said, as great as it could be in any other conflict. And of course, the brilliant thing to do now is we're in the middle of this, and we've gotten ourselves into this mess, and we're sacrificing the Ukrainians to kind of do our dirty work here. And again, not to give the Russians a pass. They should not have invaded. They're absolutely wrong for invading, and they certainly take a lot of blame. But the point I want people to understand is that there are no good guys among any of the governments involved in this. The victims are the people whose country's getting destroyed and who are getting killed out there. Those are the victims. But what the potential for terrible outcomes here is greater than any of these other conflicts we've been meddling in over the last 30 years, and we really need some sanity, some restraint, somebody who's willing to be the adult and say, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we shouldn't be trying to instigate this conflict, and take it a step further, man. We have them, what was it? We've got these guys out there at the same time that they're doing all this, at the same time that we're in the midst of all this mess, in this conflict with Russia over Ukraine, at the same time all this is going, let's also, while we're at it, how about we escalate a conflict also with China and all this saber rattling around Taiwan and everything else. Again, bad guys over there, but they don't have a natural incentive to start some. I mean, either with us or with Taiwan. I mean, Taiwan and the U.S. are two of China's biggest trading partners. But everybody wants to save face and everybody wants to look tough. And the more everybody wants to push each other's buttons, the more it instigates and escalates. And nobody's willing to be the adult and say, hey, I don't actually need to prove that I'm the toughest guy in the room. Unfortunately, that's the kind of foreign policy that we have, is everybody wants to show that they're the toughest. And, consequences be damned, unfortunately. And so we need, we can't allow our foreign policy to be made by people like this, and so that's why it's so important. And if you paid attention, if you were watching last week, as they had the Rubio-Demings debate, the sham debate that went on with no other candidates included. They talked about this, and let me tell you, there was nobody there who was urging restraint. There was nobody there saying, oh yeah, look, we got to get away from this, supervillain caricature of Putin and all this sort of thing, and we got to see there's real danger here, and we need to de-escalate. No, instead of that, you got Marco Rubio out there saying, oh, the Russians already attacked NATO because they attacked, they're talking about NATO, retaliating, and he's suggesting that Russia performed the attack on the Nord Stream, that they were responsible for that, the explosions, the damage to the Nord Stream pipeline on the far side of it, which is utter nonsense. I mean, there's absolutely no incentive for it. I mean, maybe you could argue that there might be some kind of psyop of somebody, if there's people in Russia who really want to prolong and expand it and want to instigate more of Europe getting involved because it takes away their economic ties that disincentivize it for both sides, I suppose. But utter nonsense, I think. And certainly irresponsible to make those kind of claims and to try to do that. But what do you expect from the same guy who out of the campaign trail is saying that we need a military focused on blowing up Chinese aircraft carriers? Mind you, there's only one Chinese aircraft carrier, rather than like a big old fleet, because China's actually not nipping at our heels no matter what they try to tell you, and they suggest that we need to spend more. Never mind the fact that we spend triple what China spends in terms of quote-unquote defense spending, military spending, all of this stuff. So how can it be that, we're spending triple, but we need to spend more to keep up? And again, this is a thing where it's absolute agreement. Rubio and Demings both will vote for every NDAA. They always have and they always will, as long as we allow them to stay in office. But we don't need to let them stay in office. We can get rid of both of them. We can elect somebody else to go into the U.S. Senate who will vote no, who will say, we don't need to spend 4/5 of $1 trillion in a year. And that's, not even the full military budget, because, nuclear weapons are off under the Department of Energy and all this sort of shell game and misrepresentation. But just the NDAA covering, for this last year was already, for this fiscal year, past last year, it was over $750 billion. We were increasing. We ended the longest war in American history, and we're increasing the spending. It made no sense then. It still makes no sense now. Sending tens of billions of dollars to Ukraine doesn't make any sense. We're escalating a conflict. I mean, it may be bad, it may be unfair, but it's only getting worse because we have convinced them that they need to fight and that this needs to, this long, protracted conflict. And you can see, and I've said this in a few places. I don't know if I said it over here on this, on any of the previous live streams, but they've talked about the fact that they want to, like Hillary Clinton even explicitly saying that we want to follow the model of Afghanistan in the 1980s when the USSR invaded Afghanistan. And anyone who pays attention and understands that should know that if that's the model we're following, we don't care about the people there, okay? It's estimated that around 2 million civilians were killed in that war, okay? So you just think about that. We're not talking about combatants here. We're talking about 2 million civilians, okay? Roughly. And this is all estimates because it's hard to nail some of these things down, particularly in that kind of scenario. But even beyond that, think about what you've seen in sort of the anecdotal stuff about the war in about that war, and certainly about Afghanistan that we saw as we got involved militarily in Afghanistan, which was another genius move. But one of the things we got to see when people were really trying to villainize the Taliban was the fact that, back in the 60s and 70s, Afghanistan, or at least Kabul and probably some of the other, would have been urban centers, major cities, were fairly progressive, westernized, in the sense that, women wearing very modern clothes and living fairly liberated lives by comparison to what we've seen in the last bunch of decades, and certainly in that time. How did that happen? You think maybe having an extended war, having tons of people killed, having, so much of the country be, destroyed and wrecked over this conflict. And look, I don't know what would have happened there had we not been involved, had we not been supporting them, had we not been trying to, send over the mujahideen and everything else. I don't know exactly what would have happened, whether there would have been a peace settlement a lot earlier. And I don't know. It's hard to say. Who can really say? None of us have a crystal ball to say, but it's hard to look at that. It's hard for me to certainly look at that and say, well, look, if I really care about the Ukrainians, I would certainly not want to implement this model in their country, because this is not a model that had great results for the Afghans. I don't think it would have much better results for Ukraine. Ukraine is not, Afghanistan, at least in a sense, was already had a reputation of being quite formidable in repelling foreign invasions, and that has to do with a lot of its innate characteristics, including like the geography, which is very different from Ukraine. So they kind of give them a little bit more of an advantage to be able to resist. There's a reason it's nicknamed the Graveyard of Empires. But that didn't stop our government from waging the longest war in American history there. So, but it should. But the lessons of history shouldn't be lost on us. We should be trying to learn from it. We should be giving it some thought and trying to do better and avoiding this stuff. And that is, I can't say it enough. I'm repeating myself. I know it, but this is the kind of thing that goes on. And yeah. I'll say hi to Jennifer, at least in the comments. We got a little bit of comments action, so it's always good. I know I had a few more viewers coming in and out. Certainly we want to do questions when we can get questions in here. We were doing a little bit of that, and like I said, I'd encourage everybody, if you haven't seen the interview from yesterday on Rebel Civics, on Unsafe Space, I've got the link to that and pretty much every other interview I've done on the website. If you go to the website on the media page, on the top menu bar, the media page called Media, you've got links to videos of all the interviews. Some are just audio, like links to Spotify and stuff, and there's also a few articles down there as well. So definitely go check that stuff out if you haven't, and if you want to share it with other folks who are, really unhappy with their choices on the two-party system, the two-party candidates that are here for U.S. Senate. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with everybody who's a voter here in Florida, so that they they can reconsider and do the right thing, obviously, and not continue to waste their votes on the two-party establishment that will continue to disregard their the well-being of their of our constituents here, and also who will disregard their oaths to the Constitution. I make the point, certainly was making the point yesterday, that look, we could avoid so many of these problems if we simply stuck to the Constitution. With the foreign policy, it's absolutely certain. When you talk about the fact that the Constitution requires a congressional declaration of war, we haven't declared war since World War II, so we really shouldn't be involved in all these different places in all these different ways. But we'll take it a step further and look at some other things like inflation and just the whole monetary system we have. Well, what does the Constitution say about it? The Constitution does not authorize a central bank. The Constitution does not authorize fiat money. The only thing the Constitution says is that Congress has the power to coin, which is very specific. It's not just create money, it's coin money. So they're talking about creating money out of precious metals into coins. They regulate the value thereof. So it's like weights and measures. How much silver is in a dollar? The composition of the coinage that's going to exist as the money in the country. That's what they have a legitimate power to do. Not create a central bank that prints money out of nothing, that is backed by nothing. And the Constitution even prohibits that from the state, says they can make nothing but gold and silver legal tender. Well, but what we can do is allow a free market, because again, what powers are not given to the federal government are reserved for the states and the people, except there where it's specifically denied to the states. In the case of creating fiat money, creating anything else as money. But we as the people can decide what we want to use as the medium of exchange, and that is the way out of the vortex of death, or whatever you want to call it, that we're in our monetary system, and record inflation, and maybe with all these interest rate raises and maybe with some of these other tricks, maybe they'll sort of reduce it, but we're going to continue on the same path if we continue with the same monetary system. If we continue to keep allowing the Federal Reserve to enable government largesse and the irresponsibility of Congress by allowing them to, again, have the ability to create money out of nothing, out of thin air. So we want sound money. We want money, I like to say it this way, although we're not really talking about the dollar here, but everybody deserves a dollar that is worth just as much tomorrow as it was yesterday when you earned it. And how do we get there? What's the best path we can use to get there? And I say it's monetary freedom, man. Not the central planning, even aside from the fact that it's not constitutionally authorized, what we've learned from this experiment over the last 100 years plus, since 1913 especially, is that neither our government nor the central bank adjacent to it can be trusted with control of our money supply. Money is too important. I know sometimes people think, why are you so focused on money, man? Money is important. Money is one half of just about every transaction. It is how we transmit value and how we engage in commerce, and this is important. Economics is not, again, just greedy people focused on money. Economics is about the allocation of resources, and how do we allocate resources most effectively in our nation, in the world, by doing it more efficiently, by doing it more effectively. We improve the quality of people's lives. We improve the quality of life, the standard of living, and we lower the cost of it along the way. And that's how we do it. But we've got to let the market work, and if we can do that in other areas, we can certainly do that when it comes to money. And so we got to have what I like to call monetary freedom. Allow the people to use, whether it is gold and silver backed or some other precious metal backed by some kind of hard asset as a kind of notes or the actual coinage, or use the modern technology, man, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin especially. But certainly I would be allowing people to use whatever they have confidence in. Let the market decide, because the market is us. The market is the people. Decide what it is that we have confidence in. What do the people have confidence in? And let that be the common store of value. Not by government decree, but by the public deciding. The public knows better than anybody in Washington, D.C. Let people work. And again, the answer may not be the same. It may not be a one-size-fits-all. It may be for certain kind of transactions you use one thing, and for smaller day-to-day transactions you use something else. It can vary. And so, but we've got to let it decide. Well, one thing we know for absolute certain is that the federal government cannot be trusted with it, just like they cannot be trusted with all these other things. And if the federal government can't be trusted, then it is certainly true that the unelected bureaucrats in the central bank likewise cannot be trusted. Yet, doesn't war allow the government to create jobs? It's funny when I talk about shutting this thing down and cutting defense spending. Somebody did come back to me and say, well, what about those jobs? And I'm like, look, man, it ain't worth it. Okay, even if you think, wow, having these great jobs and people getting paid, even if that were legitimately a thing, it ain't worth it. Not for all the innocent people who get killed, not for all the American soldiers who come back racked with PTSD, who end up blowing their own brains out, and the others who maybe don't go that far but end up so distraught and burdened that they can't readjust to society and are continue to suffer. There's so many tragedies along the way, not to mention the endless amounts of debt. But beyond that also is the fact that, okay, we've got all these people working these jobs in this defense industry. This is a misallocation of human resources. Why are we going to have these people, these super geniuses coming up with these incredible, crazy, super weapons that are, maybe get fired maybe once ever, and you spend all these millions and tens of millions of dollars in research and development for it, and then something doesn't even work or whatever. And why not put those guys to work on something that actually, why not allow the market to find those guys? Because if those guys are so talented and they're so skilled, these genius engineers, let's have them go into the free market, get hired on a job somewhere where they actually make something that makes people's lives better rather than killing people. I think that's a great idea, would be to reallocate. And again, when I say that, I don't mean for government to step in and decide where people are going to go and what kind of jobs they're going to do. But we certainly shouldn't be doing it by by just pumping endless amounts of dollars into the military industrial complex so that they can create jobs and, again, swoop up all this great talent and then, again, use them for stuff, waste their talents, let me say, on things that are not going to improve the lives of people day to day. So, yeah, somebody seriously came back about that. Not too serious, but he did say, like, oh, people will be resistant about that because of the jobs. Yeah. Well, I don't know about with that group when I was speaking to them if they were on board with plant prohibition, but we are the voices against that. So we want to make sure that nobody gets their door kicked in, guns pointed in their face, and thrown into prison over growing a plant. It makes absolutely no sense. You should treat plants like plants, and it's not even a thing about it necessarily even being a plant. Look, man, anything you do, if you're not violating somebody else's rights, you should be free. And it really boils down to that when you talk about domestic policy and all these different laws and why we got so many problems and conflicts in our own communities and society, within our nation. So much of it you can trace back to the fact that we have criminalized actions and activities where there are no victims, where nobody's rights are being violated, whether that is selling loose cigarettes on the street or growing a plant in your house or whatever that may be. The fact that we are have the government sticking itself and we're sending police over to do this. And people talk about, well, you support the police. What do you feel about the police? Look, I think we could help the police do their job a lot better by not having them waste their time on guys growing plants or mixing up powder, and instead have them focus on killers and rapists and thieves and things of that nature. I think that's what the police should be focused on. We shouldn't be, throwing guys up against the wall, stop and frisk to go and, unless there's somebody there who you actually think committed a violent crime already, and you've got justifiable cause for that. But, just looking to see if someone's carrying a gun, you got a right to carry a gun. That's the Second Amendment. Shall not be infringed. If somebody's got, again, a bag of weed, it's a plant. You're talking about, a plant. So it makes absolutely no sense. We've got to change, and if we want to, if we want something better, and we want to repair the relationship, because that's part of the thing is, we've got, in a lot of communities, particularly marginalized communities, we've got an adversarial relationship between the police and the communities they are supposed to be serving, they're supposed to be protecting, and it goes down to that, police sticking themselves in the sense of trying to go after people who aren't violating anyone else's rights. You think when you see like a police sting at like a massage parlor or something, like, what are they doing, man? How many murders are unsolved? How many rape kits are untested? And this is what our tax dollars get spent on. It's worse than embarrassing. It's destructive, and so it's one of many different kind of policies that we can address by changing the way we view things and getting rid of the old ideas about how these things need to be done. But that is. I'm going to wrap it up with that topic there. I need to update the website to have events. We got the next and probably the last big event of campaigning ahead of Election Day is going to be Canifest on November 5th in Mount Dora. So I'm planning to be out there. I got to post the details on the website though, but I will do that. Stay tuned for that. And again, obviously, early voting has begun. Please vote for Dennis Misigoy, obviously, me, and spread the word, man. Share the video here, whether you're on Facebook. I'm gonna go post this on YouTube as well, and it'll be on the front page of the website along with the debate answers from the September 15th debate. We got lots of content over there. We got more content coming. Share the content. Let people know you don't have to settle. You don't have to accept a lesser evil. And really, we can't afford to. We can't keep on this path. It's the tagline on the website, and it bears repeating. Change cannot wait. We cannot wait any longer. Now is the time. And we also have that post on there. That's the last blog post I have on there. You can go down to the front page of the website and you can see that as well. Now is the time. Okay, we can't afford to wait any longer. So I hope you guys will agree and make sure that other people recognize this fact and give me their vote. We can change history, man. We can lead the way for the country. Florida can lead the way, set the example, and we should. I mean, I don't have much confidence in any other states doing it. So let's do this. Let's do this. All right. And as well, if you guys have any other questions for me, reach out. Like I said, we got another live stream next week, and but I try to respond to stuff if it's whether email or messaging on social media. I'll do my best. If it's a really, really long-winded thing, I might have a little bit of trouble getting to it or getting through it all, but I will do my best. All right. Thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you guys next week, and we'll see. Check out, like I said, check out the latest interviews and the other content. All right, guys. Thank you again, and I will talk to you guys next week, if not sooner. All right. Thank you.